All right, good morning, everyone, distinguished guests and fellow enthusiasts of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. We welcome you to this insightful summit dedicated to STEM education. For the next slide. I am Claire Duce. I am the Senior Associate of K-12 Education at Children at Risk and will be your MC for today. Children at Risk is a Texas nonpartisan research and advocacy nonprofit dedicated to addressing the root causes of child poverty and inequities. Our mission is to serve as a catalyst for change to improve the quality of life for children through strategic research, public policy analysis, education, collaboration, and advocacy. This event is hosted in partnership with our Texas Family Leadership Council, a collaborative of family-serving organizations across the state. You can view the agenda for today's program and get to know some of our featured experts using the links that will be dropped in the chat. If you have any questions during any of the panels, please don't hesitate to submit those questions for our speakers using the Q&A function. We'll also put a survey in the chat that we encourage you to fill out to inform our 2024 programmatic events. After this event, all registrants will receive any resources shared as well as a link to watch the recording. Major thank you to our sponsors, Shell, Boardwalk Pipelines, and Corbridge. And thank you to our partners, Early Learning Alliance, Molina Healthcare, United Way Tarrant County, Children's Defense Fund Texas, Alchemy Studio and Labs, Fab Lab El Paso, the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers, Texas A&M Commerce, Physics and Astronomy Department, and the Little STEM Academy. We're going to start today by taking a closer look at some data. I want to start by providing some valuable insight on the students in Texas public schools. Having this data at the outset is crucial because it provides a foundational understanding of the educational landscape in Texas. This data sets the stage for evidence-based strategies to promote inclusivity, equity, and excellence in STEM education and workforce development across the state. As we progress, our next slide shines a spotlight on the significant number of rural schools in Texas. It's paramount that we recognize this data because it underscores the vital importance of addressing the unique challenges and need of rural ISDs across the 20 regions. By understanding the distribution, we're better equipped to discuss strategies for enhancing equity, resource allocation, and access to quality education for all students, regardless of their geographical location. Next, we are going to establish some foundational understanding of the Texas public school system, specifically when we look at STEM. I want to point out the second statistic, as we know that robust data demonstrates that students who enroll in advanced math beyond Algebra 2 prior to high school graduation while maintaining a consistent four-year commitment to math education in high school are more inclined to successfully completing a 2- or 4-year college program or obtaining a post-secondary industry certificate. As we know, when they obtain these qualifications beyond high school, it's a dependable indicator that the student's ability to access well-paying career opportunities throughout their lifetime. All three of these statistics really emphasize the strong focus on advanced science and math education and highlight the state's commitment to STEM, as well as the potential for growth and innovation as our state continues to grow. So in 2006, the Texas High School Project initiated the Texas Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math, or TSTEM initiative. This public-private partnership established 35 small schools, as well as 5 to 6 STEM centers, and was the first investment with a strong focus of STEM education in our state. Alongside TSTEM, we know we have early college high schools, as well as Pathways in Technology, early college high schools, or P-TECH schools. All of these open enrollment programs combine high school and college coursework and historically benefit underserved and at-risk students by helping them acquire technical skills, earn college credentials and degrees, and pursue careers in these high-demand fields. This network encompasses over 540 campuses, but here in red and pink are 293 STEM-focused schools across the 20 regions. I want to give highlight to about region 14 to 17 on the far right, as we saw that those are primarily rural ISDs in those regions. So we know that location or resource funding might prevent them from being able to open these specialty schools. And so we need to make sure we're investing and really looking at strategies on those rural ISDs across those regions in the traditional schools and how STEM-focused work is prioritized in those schools, and look at strategies on how we can bolster academic outcomes for students. This next slide is going to highlight student achievement across 4 various subjects and the resilience and progress our students have made in the face of educational challenges post-COVID. There's an encouraging trend across all subjects as we see signs of post-pandemic recovery. But we want to highlight math and science, or the red and purple lines, as we see 43% of students and 46% of students are meeting grade level or above in 2023. On our next slide, we're going to look specifically at math outcomes. We know that when we start to break it down by student populations, we're able to understand how they're faring in math education, and it really guides us in addressing the disparities in our educational system. As a state, we hear that 43% of students are meeting grade level above across all math tested subjects, but we see economically disadvantaged students are at 33%, emergent bilingual students are at 32%, and students receiving special education support are at 16%. We look at the next slide, we see that comprehensive overview, but for science, again, for economically disadvantaged students, we're at 34%, emergent bilingual students, 26%, and students receiving special education support at 16%. It did not. Next slide. There we go. So even though we see this encouraging increase in post-pandemic recovery, we're not doing as much as we can to close these gaps as it pertains to our students' population. All right, our next slide, we're going to look at college, career, and military readiness. So these scores are really a culmination of different indicators. It's dual credit, AP course completion, industry certificates, enlisting in the US Armed Forces, and many more. So even with this high range of indicators, we still see that as a state, only 65.2% of graduates in the 21-22 school year most recently were college, career, and military ready. We break that down a little bit further and look just at those college indicators. So meeting criteria on AP or IB examinations, earning associate degree, meeting TSI criteria. We see our state take a dip to only 52.7% of graduates, with those student population gaps only growing wider. So one indicator, as mentioned in that college readiness model, is the TSI, so the Texas Science Initiative. And basically what this is a way for universities to see how incoming classes are faring as it pertains to math and literacy, and if they're adequately prepared for their coursework. We see a dip again below 50%, and then we see those gaps grow wider. You're good. So we cannot talk about STEM education without addressing STEM teacher workforce, or the foundation of student learning. A study done by Texas Tech University showed that throughout the state, 38% of STEM teachers do not have initial teaching certifications in a STEM field. So what does this mean? Initial certification in STEM field is an important factor to consider for Texas math and science teachers. They have more pedagogy understanding or receive clinical experience in that subject area, where teachers that are not in the dark blue at the bottom of this graph just took the content specific test, but might have background knowledge in a different subject. When we look at rural schools again, they actually have the least number of teachers initially certified in a STEM field, with only 55% of current STEM teachers in rural schools holding an initial STEM teaching certification. This suggests that a large portion of students in rural schools are being taught in STEM courses by teachers without initial certifications. That we want teachers in the classroom, and we're excited to retain high quality teachers no matter their background. What are we doing for these gaps to ensure that those teachers are well prepared in curriculum and support for those students, especially as we see those gaps grow wider in our rural schools? So what's next? Just around the corner, Texas Workforce Commission projects about 1.9 million STEM openings in Texas. And the next slide, we're going to highlight some opportunities for Texas. We know 9 of the 20 biggest employers in Texas are STEM related. And as we see those year out projections by 2032, we see STEM occupations grow another 10.8%. All of this is to say that inspiring and developing the next generation of STEM talent is critical to the economic success of Texas. I want to highlight in the next slide 2 things that happened in the 88th session that are detrimental to improving student outcomes in Texas. SB 2124 now ensures that students who score in the top 40% of state assessments proceed to accelerated math opportunities and are set up to take Algebra 1 by the 8th grade. This is important since data shows us that when you complete Algebra 1 in the 8th grade, that student is more likely to receive a STEM endorsement in high school. And then, as mentioned before, that Algebra 2 outcome that sets them up for career and college readiness. HB1 Article 3 had a financial rider that provided $10 million to UT Austin to establish a statewide computer science pipeline initiative. and that'll bolster up our coding and computer science programs and teacher development across the state. All of this is now our eyes are turned on the fourth special session. We understand that our STEM programs are only as strong as the schools and districts they are in. We hear day after day the need for more funding and teacher support, and we urge our state to continue to invest in our public schools. As we know, an investment in Texas public schools is an investment in over 5 million of our own children and our future as a state. Awesome. So with that, we're excited to move on to some panels and some solution-based work. We're going to start with tech innovation and the future workforce landscape. In this session, we're venturing into the ever-evolving landscape of technology and its profound impact on our future workforce. We have a great lineup of speakers. First, we have Ganesh Padmanabhan, CEO of Autonomize Inc. We have Ms. Sabari Raja, Managing Partner of JFF Ventures, and our panel discussion will be expertly moderated by someone who understands the intersection of education and workforce development intimately, Chief Strategy Officer of Children at Risk, Charanya Rajkumar.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Claire. Good morning, everyone. My name is Charanya Ravikumar, and I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Children at Risk. And this summit is a personal favorite of mine. I actually have an electrical computer engineering degree, and before I transitioned to nonprofit, I worked in the tech sector for several years, and so STEM still remains a very topic of passion of mine. So I'm excited to kick off the summit today with our first panel discussion. And in this panel, we will be focusing on tech innovation and the future workforce landscape. And so joining me in this panel are two brilliant and very highly successful techies. We have Ganesh Padmanabhan, CEO of Autonomize AI, and Sabri Raja, Managing Partner at JFF Ventures. And so thank you so much to both of you for joining us today. So let's get started with you, Ganesh. So emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, machine learning, quantum computing, there's virtual reality, all kinds of really cool technologies. They're really reshaping not just the tech industry, right, but all industries. And you, Sabri, all of us are working with technologies that didn't really even exist even just a few years ago, and definitely not while we were all in school. So given that, what specific skills do you believe will be in high demand for the future workforce? And how can schools and educational institutions today prepare students for these jobs of the future?
Charanya, thank you. Thank you for, and all the organizers, thanks for inviting me for this beautiful session, very noble cause, and excited to participate here. So, I've been fortunate to be in the technology space, and like you, Charanya, I have a STEM background too, mechanical engineering degree, and then being in computers and computer-related work for the rest of my career. I think what's happening in the industry today, especially with these exponential technologies like AI, like blockchain, virtual reality, and so forth, it's a huge step forward in the human evolution, in our capability set, right? If you take a moment to think about it, the world has become a very, the information that is available in the world to do anything today is mind-boggling. And it has far exceeded the human capacity to process all of that information to make good decisions, right? So just like, when you have handicaps, you use tools, you have a set of these amazing tools like artificial intelligence, like virtual reality, to make sense out of the world, to see what is happening and how you can do the best job that you have, right? That said, I think with this comes if you just take artificial intelligence for a moment, AI at an atomic level, at a capability level, does a very good job, even better than human beings, in looking at a picture and identifying objects or emotions in there, looking at a text and understanding humor and sarcasm in it. But then what is innately unique about human beings is our ability, our agency, our ability to actually, the will to make something happen, the true creativity, what I call multimodal creativity, which is like not just looking at a picture and identifying something, but correlating that to text, correlating that to something you heard a long time ago, communicating that effectively to get a group of people coming together and perform a task. So at a broad level, what does that mean? Focusing on things like problem solving, You may have tools like AI and virtual reality, but the problem still needs to be defined, broken down, and solved. Empathy and the human connection is another area that I think is uniquely human and will always remain human. The multimodal creativity that I mentioned, having a very good intuition, human intuition is a very powerful thing. So being able to, I think one of the skills I fundamentally believe that we should all impart in our students is the ability to learn. How do you learn to learn new things? Because it's the shelf life of any new technology is going to be shortened and compressed a lot, right? And then lastly, I think I would just say that if you really think about this, the ability to actually just focus on what is uniquely human, creativity, the teamwork, the communication, the liberal arts side of the things, mixing that with a contextual and intuitive understanding of the STEM topics is going to be a powerful combination in the future.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I feel like we're constantly having to be students in this ever-changing world. And so instilling that ability of the learning to learn, that's absolutely very important. Awesome. So Sabri, collaboration between academia and industry is something that's really essential to build a very strong workforce. And so how do you think schools and businesses, can work together to effectively ensure that our educational programs are aligned with the real-time needs of the industries, especially the tech industry, so guaranteeing that students are job ready upon graduation? So, you co-founded a platform that connects students to industry experts to bring them some real-world relevance and career exposure. So I'd love to have you talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, Charanya, it's, I spent almost a decade building a company specifically to solve that problem. And today, as an investor, I'm investing in companies that are continuing to use the latest technologies to solve the problem even better, right? So number one, I think, is exposure, right? Like you can't be what you can't see. So a lot of times when we talk about connecting industry and education or preparing students for the future of work, we tend to think high school and above, but sometimes that is a bit too late, So to educators in the room, I always emphasize that it's never too early to create that real world connection. So starting in elementary is a must. And that was one of the key things we worked on at my company, Nepris, which is now called Pathful. One is it's easily said than done. A lot of times traditionally schools, when you say, hey, we need to connect to industry, it turns into a once-a-year career day, which is great. It's better than nothing. But how do we make like every day a career day, and not just, hey, here's so-and-so, who's a dentist, or here's so-and-so who's a programmer, but really meaningfully integrating industry relevance and real world relevance into your day-to-day learning and teaching. I mean, industry, what kids learn in the classroom, really, it's so, they really don't have a connection to why am I learning what I'm learning? And we've all asked these questions as kids, like I always joke about this. I have 2 engineering degrees and I still don't know why I learned calculus, right? Until I was actually in a session with Samsung where they were talking about how they use calculus to sort of predict the supply demand curve before they invest in an $800 million machine, So the minute you start making those connections and integrating it into the curriculum, it suddenly becomes more stickier. Student engagement increases in the classroom. There's a purpose for why you're learning what you're learning, and not just to get good test scores, right? So that's the number one thing I'll say is real world learning integration into curriculum. But employers need to be more involved in the classroom, and there are technology solutions today that's making it possible, right? I mean, we have a distributed workforce now. People are sitting in front of computers all day long. Virtual connections have become an everyday thing for everybody, thanks to COVID, right? So it's really using the right technology tools to make that happen, because teachers have a lot on their plate. You can't really expect them to go find industry, connect them, manage them. So many, many tools are available these days in order to make that happen at scale. 2 more things I'll say is, one thing you mentioned or in the opening session, the number of teachers who actually have industry work experience is less than 33%. So how do we help teachers first get that real world connection relevance, right? So teacher externships, especially in Texas, a lot of the education service centers have been trying to do more teacher externships where it's not just connecting students to industry, but actually connecting teachers to industry as well. And that's important. The last thing is everything starts at the curriculum level, right? I mean, we're trying to kind of create a Band-Aid approach and saying the curriculum is what it is. Let's try and make these connections and fix this, right? And create real world connections. But what if we actually created curriculum with this real world learning in mind, right? And I was part of the entrepreneurship curriculum committee with TEA, and it was encouraging to see how TEA was going above and beyond to really integrate industry practitioners into the design of the curriculum itself. So for people in those decision-making capacities, I would really encourage thinking about industry engagement, even at that root level of creating that next-gen curriculum, where it's a collaboration between industry and education. So.
Wonderful, thank you. I personally didn't know TEA was doing that, so I'm really happy to hear that they're doing that.
Yeah.
Ganesh, so data privacy, cybersecurity, they're really big issues of focus, in this digital world we live in. And I know you are personally a big advocate for the ethical use of data and AI. So what steps can educational institutions and schools start taking to educate students about these issues so that they're prepared to navigate these ethical challenges that they might face in the tech and other industries?
That's a great question. And if I may follow on from the last comment that Shabri made around like how we have to rethink the way we educate. Same thing. We live in a world where technology is integrated as a fabric, right? The same concerns that now we are very familiar with, and we actually educate our students about what do you share on social media? How do you remain vigilant for, digital or online abuse that happens? And how do you actually notice things when things are not wrong and engage people and so forth? Well, that whole environment just got supercharged with more technology, right? With AI, for example, ChatGPT can, I'm sure everybody's now familiar with ChatGPT, which is an AI tool that helps you that can mimic human-like creative abilities. So if you want to write a letter and say, I want you to write this letter in the tone of another person, and here's a sample letter, it'll do it beautifully without error, and it almost will make that person convinced. So it's similar to voice. You can have people clone your voice, or somebody can clone your voice and say, I'm so and so calling, and all of that kind of, there's an explosion of challenges that technology is going to introduce, and they're already introducing. I think the way you deal with this is just like you would, go back to the basics fundamentally, right? It starts with education, and education is understanding, so like there's a school, education is understanding these are tools that exist for the good people and for the bad people, right? So how do you make sure that you use this more efficiently and effectively to meet your goals? So responsibility, I'll take a simple example. When ChatGPT came about, there's a lot of universities who started banning the use of ChatGPT to create your school essays. Or even if you're actually doing some school work, if the student doesn't have enough time, they're just going to give a couple of prompts to ChatGPT, is going to generate a particular thing. Well, a lot of teachers and a lot of professors actually shut that down. So you cannot do that in my class. Well, there's a few of them who were smart enough to say, you know what, use ChatGPT to create this, but I want you to grade that paper that ChatGPT created to go make sure that it is not bullshitting, not hallucinating, the whole 9 yards, right? So how do we? So that's a creative use of actually educating them to use this powerful technology, but also be vigilant of the risks and challenges associated with it. The second thing is, I think education definitely across the board about the use of this technology, what are the unintended and intended consequences of using this powerful technology and so forth. But also getting back to the basics on like you should treat this as how we would do in real life, meaning you don't talk to strangers, as an example, right? In a thing, and how do you actually trust an AI system to reach out to you saying, hey, I'm an AI, I'm going to be good for you and do something really nice for you. You won't trust you. You should treat it like how you do in real life, right? And also, I think from a privacy and ethics perspective, there's definitely challenges around, you should there's all this governance work that is going on. The Biden administration just launched a AI executive order that, kind of puts in a very stringent guidelines on how people or companies can use these powerful systems to educate and communicate to the masses, if you will. But I think it all starts down with, getting back to education, activation, understanding the risk, and engagement, right? And what I mean by engagement is actually, if you're teachers and you're seeing something, if you don't want the Googles, the OpenAIs, the Microsofts of the world to actually go build and design these systems and the code of ethics for these systems for you, right? So the question you should be asking as educators is like, how do I get involved and get my voices heard in this particular thing? So, not an easy answer. We're very early in this innings of this thing, but if history is any lesson that we can learn from, look at how the evolution of social media, the good and the bad that came with it, the same thing we can expect here. Same with like the internet, the use of internet, net positive it will be definitely a net positive with all these technologies, but there's be this bumpy road that we actually start, navigating through education, awareness, and engagement.
I would say for me, personally, the fear of some of these issues, sometimes prevents me from engaging more with AI, but we've been using it more even in our little nonprofit and really seeing the benefits. So I think it's a matter of balancing those fears and then, those advantages. So Sabri, gig economy, freelance work, these are things that are becoming very prevalent in many fields and especially tech. So how can schools and educational systems support students in developing entrepreneurial skills, right, that will enable them to thrive in this workforce landscape?
Yeah, I mean, I know why you asked me this question because, I've spent quite a bit of time thinking about this. So, I mean, what does gig economy really mean, right? I mean, it's basically giving everybody an opportunity to be an entrepreneur, to create your own timelines, your own schedules, your own projects. It gives you a lot of flexibility, and moving into that gig economy, coming from a very traditional idea of I go to work, 8 to 5, somebody's going to tell me what I need to do. I need to meet those. It's completely putting people in a different mindset. Most entrepreneurs figure that out, but normally when people go into the workforce, they don't have that mindset, So really, as educators, you already answered the question, Charanya. It's how do you instill those entrepreneurial skills at an early age? So number one is time management. How do you really understand? Okay, what do I need to do? How do I prioritize? And how do I have self-awareness and self-control in order to manage my time effectively? Next, I mean, that's also tied to project management skills, right? And then really, if you see, it's also about communication. I mean, if you're a gig worker, you need to go find your own projects. I mean, learning to use technology, the many platforms. We've invested in a company called CreatorUp, and it's not just gig platforms for traditional software and coding jobs. Now there's gig platforms for everything from creative work to graphics design to video production. So it's everywhere. So the number one thing is, how do you really, you all said like learn to learn, right? And have that growth mindset and continuously learn. So one is learning to hunt, learning to really scour all of this information and know what kind of projects I want to do. Where do I find this? And creating a social capital and a network in a virtual environment, that is so key. And networking is part of everything. If you don't know how to network, you're not going to get the gig jobs, So as educators, like creating projects and opportunities where students are able to really define and scope projects, manage their time, collaborate with peers and others even outside of their own immediate network, learning to actually present their ideas to a whole new set of people. That's basically creating that authentic audience. I think project-based learning really emphasizes that authentic connection. That's really important because you're continuously going to be talking to people that you've never met before and convincing them that you can do this. But everything boils down to skills and transferable skills, so not just, It's not enough if you know how to solve quadratic equations and understand physics and chemistry, but under every class, even a history class, building projects and putting kids out there in groups and allowing them to interact with an authentic audience outside of their own immediate network is going to be crucial in giving them those transferable and entrepreneurial skills.
Dinesh, did you want to add something?
Yeah, no. So
Sure.
during the pandemic, there was this no, it's actually beautifully said, Shabri. I think the whole notion of when you get into a decentralized environment where work is remote and people are remote, or teams that you engage with are remote, how do you give our children the tools to go be successful in this, right? So during the pandemic, there was an experimental school called Synthesis.is. I think it came out of the Ad Astra, Tesla, Elon Musk, SpaceX, community, where it was all about experiential project-based learning. They ran an experiment to actually see, can you replicate that whole interactive, project-based, teamwork-oriented, communicative learning in a distributed environment? And I actually signed up my now 9-year-old for that during that time. And it was fascinating. All they do is play games, right? They play games. And the whole idea with Synthesis Schools was also about how do you use play as an educational tool. But the beauty of what they did, which was definitely was working, it was hard to scale that kind of a model, but we can do it in classrooms today, which is they introduce a problem with no rules. And the children make up the rules, they communicate, they have to learn how to influence other people to get on their idea. They have to learn to experiment very quickly. They have to learn, they have to learn to fail. And then, at the end of a 30-minute session, they take something that looks like a blank canvas and produce beautiful art out of it, or solve a math problem in there. And so it was just beautiful the way they orchestrated it. Now, it was a small experiment. It ran, and they were trying to target a different thing. They've evolved as a company too. But the whole notion of actually project-based learning, but trying to do it in a way that when you're in a decentralized remote environment, and people and collaborators will be everywhere, focusing on that human capabilities, teamwork, communication, all of that stuff, and learning to learn. It's going to be the magic bullet.
And I'll just add one more thing to that, because this is a topic we can talk for hours. But I mean, really, what is at the core of successful entrepreneurs is grit and being very comfortable with failure. And in this culture, we feel like, we reward the successes extensively and discard the failures. And we have to sort of change that mindset a bit, so.
Beautifully said.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. I mean, I just reflect on there's the hard skills that you need to do STEM jobs in general, but then those soft skills are so very important. And they're great transferable skills too, right? Because I did engineering and I worked in tech for a long time, and I'm in nonprofit, and I'm always asked about what skills transferred over. So there's definitely those engineering mindsets, being very methodical, things like that. But it's really the soft skills that you pick up in any industries that ultimately enable you to be successful. So I really appreciate both of you. I know we've run out of time and there's so much more we can discuss, but definitely want to give space to some of the other topics in today's panel. But thank you again so much to both of you for joining us. And I hope we can partner with you both again in the future. We really look forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Awesome. Thank you so much to the panelists that just spoke, as well as Char, who was able to provide some insightful insight into that as well. We're going to move on into our next panel, who bring a wealth of knowledge and experience around inclusivity in STEM education and employment. Our first panelist, Dr. Sharika Sanders, is a senior technical engineer at Manomer Polymers. We also have Liliana Gonzalez, manager of research and impact at the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers. We have Mr. H. Puentes, co-founder, president, and CEO of San Diego Squared. And our discussion will be skillfully moderated by the executive director of FabLab El Paso, Kathy Chen Arriaga. Together, our panelist and moderator will delve into actionable strategies to break down systemic barriers and bias, ensuring that everyone has equal access to STEM careers. We'll wait for. So while we wait for, oh, I just saw them pop up. A couple more to join us. I just want to say how excited we are to delve into this conversation. All right, Kathy, take it away.
Hello, Dr. Sharika and H. Puentes and Liliana. So great to have you guys on this panel with me. Let's jump right in. So Sharika, as a senior technical engineer, you've likely navigated a lot of challenges in your work. Could you please start us off by sharing an experience that highlights the importance of inclusivity in STEM workplaces?
Wow. So we're going to start off with a heavy one. So thank you everyone for the invitation to join you guys today. I really appreciate it, and I've appreciated the conversation thus far and the rest of the panelists leading up into this one. Challenges with inclusivity in STEM. So yes, obviously, well, I shouldn't say obviously, but I can speak from the perspective of the chemical industry, which is not inclusive at the moment. It is about 90% are predominantly male and predominantly white. And so I've been in this industry about 25 years now. And some of the things that I've seen that have come out of inclusivity in STEM, and where I've seen more people in the room that look like myself and look like a lot of the panelists here today. I've seen where there's been innovation in areas such as consumer goods. So with the polymer science industry, when it was mostly run by males and mostly run by whites, some of the things that were not included from a female perspective are things like, how can we make improvements in diaper tabs? Right? How can we make improvements in just diaper construction as well? Because you have mostly women who are changing diapers, and not to take anything away from the men, because I know that they do a lot of diaper changing as well. But these are some innovations that I've seen come out of it, of women being a part of the conversation. Additionally to that, different things like easy open snacks for kids. So if you're a mom and you're driving, you have your kids in the back seat and they're screaming for snacks, and you're trying to get everything done all at once, you want that bag to be easily opened. And so different things like that, and stand-up pouches. So you guys may remember some time ago, Capri Sun was having some issues with mold in the Capri Sun pouch. Well, some innovation that came out of that was to make the bottom of the pouch clear. And that was something that, a mom came up with, because she's the consumer, she's going out, she's getting snacks for her kids, and she wants to be able to quickly identify if this is a safe snack for her child. So those are just a few examples of innovations that I've seen that have come out of inviting women into the room to discuss what markets will we approach as a chemical industry. Kathy, I think you're on mute.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, I was just, agreeing that everything you said is right on point with the importance of incorporating more women and people of color voices in the whole user discovery and user research part of a product development lifecycle. The next question is for Liliana. So Liliana, working with the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers, you have really unique perspectives into the professional industry. Can you tell us about some initiatives that you have seen that have effectively encourage young people from underrepresented backgrounds to pursue STEM fields?
Thank you, Kathy. I can definitely talk a little bit about that. I think there's a lot of initiatives that stand out to me in the work that I'm in with SHEP. We also work with IESIS, with Society of Women Engineers, with NSBE. And a lot of the things that we see is that there's really an embrace for representation and commitment to the community, right? So it's not just evaluating a program that's going to grow, that's research-based. It's also taking that time to learn about the communities that we're working with and the industries that we're working with. So for example, we have an Equipando Padres program that's very unique in that it addresses a gap that is focused on parent and family engagement, where there's a lot of focus on working with students at that high school level. We know that commitment and that family support is really integral. And I'm not going to give away the secret sauce, right? But our membership with SHIP is we have over 16,000 members across the United States. So any major school that has an engineering program has a SHIP chapter. And before, now we have these programs that are evaluated, they're research-based. But before this, we had a lot more of a informal networks where students were going out in their community. And Savari talked about transferable skills, that network, that mentorship. That has been happening and is now just getting optimized, right? We see that youth and families respond really well to seeing themselves represented. And so if they have alumni come and speak, share their personal, connection, their personal contact, they'll say, come reach out to me directly. We've had parents in some of our sessions that talk about an apprehension for their child. I think that we had a mother once who say, I'm apprehensive for my daughter to go into this field because it's male dominated and I don't want to see her suffer. And there was a panelist, I believe from Boeing, who was a member who said, I experienced the same thing. Here's my personal phone number. I want to meet with you. I want to meet with your daughter because it's something that happened to her, very personally, very directly. So to hear from them that, hey, I grew up down the street, I was in your shoes. Not only did I experience, but I also learned from failure and normalizing that there are uncertainties, that it's okay, right? That there's still a lot of opportunity for success. And then I believe for the second part, how can these be replicated? Working with these organizations that are already in the community, so those nonprofits, schools, community centers that have those relationships established is always great. And then sharing the resources and expertise and best practices, right? So opportunities like this, so we can connect and network and see what's working for each other. And then shared visions for clear goals for success. I think that is super important when you're working with industry, with public organizations and nonprofits. And I think my last two would be wraparound services. So understanding the challenges and providing really, really direct approaches to those challenges. Like if you're hosting a workshop for parents and it's 20 minutes away from the school at the university, are you providing gas cards? Are you looking at getting a school bus to shuttle? Those kinds of things are something that we don't always think about when we're thinking about the solution and the big problem. But those are those details that are really important to make sure that folks are seen and heard, right? And then my last bit is going to be always evaluation and assessment, because we do want to scale those, and the way to fund those is to always prove that they're working and that they're effective. So yeah, working with Latinos in STEM, we know that they're such a big part of the future for the United States, and we have to recognize that shared prosperity for everyone really depends on their success in STEM.
I love your answer. It was so thorough and comprehensive. Especially love what you said about mentorship and the importance of having those relationships with individuals already in industry. I recently learned about this idea of a reverse mentorship, which I also love because there's so much to learn, right? It's a permeable relationship and it doesn't just go one way. So love everything you said, Liliana. So next, I'm going to move on to my next panelist, H. Puentes. So in your role as the co-founder and CEO of San Diego Squared, you're involved in shaping company culture. So can you tell us about how can startups and established companies alike create an inclusive environment that attracts diverse talent and ensures that everyone's voice is heard and valued?
Yeah, so this might be a little controversial, so take it with a grain of salt. For me, it's about like when we talk about, it's about compensation. It's about power. Like at the end of the day, if we're, yes, it's important to have your voice heard and valued. But in our society, how that voice is heard and how it's valued is measured by power, and power is dictated by the compensation structure of an organization. And so what I often say is, the compensation drives the power dynamic. It drives who gets to say what, who manages a budget, who runs a P&L, who stands to gain if there's a liquidity event at that company, right? If the company's acquired, if the company's sold off. At the end of the day, there's only so many pieces of the pie. How many pieces do you have? How many pieces do I have? And so when I work with companies or look at companies, if I see, the first thing I'm going to ask is, Let me see your board. Let me see the people that manage budgets, that run, that have ownership. Let me see your cap table. And that tells me everything I need. And if that group is not reflective of the community in which you operate in, and it's very simple. If 50% are women, then that should be 50% women. If 20% are Latinos, 20% should be Latinos. If 15% are Black African American, whatever your community looks like, and I'm going to compare the two. And then if they're very off, I'm going to wonder, what are you doing to drive towards that? Right? Because, and all of your DEI initiatives and all the work that you do with respect to being inclusive and valued and belonging and whatever word you want to throw on it, you need to be driving towards there. And your programs and your operations and your HR and the executive team should be focused on that and that only. You can keep your Cinco de Mayo party, you can keep your MLK party, you can keep the biggest pride parade vehicle that you want to have and tell me about all the people that we're helping with. But if you do that and you don't address the fact that the power lies in a community that doesn't reflect the broader community, then it's just like, you're not really about the work. That's low-hanging fruit. That's optical. That makes you look good. If you're serious about having people's voice heard and everybody involved, then you should be solely focused on who stands to gain if this organization does very, very well. And so that's why it's a lot easier to do that at the initial phases, right? So entrepreneurs, that's where, like, you could do it easily, right? You can, have 3, 4, you can, the 4 of us start a company. All right, we're good. Like, we're going to be more likely to hire people that look like us. Our networks are going to be more aligned, right? I'm going to be drawing from the SHIP chapter, from the Fab Lab chapter. I'm going to, from diverse chemical engineers, right? It's just going to be natural. Where it becomes really tricky is when you have these large organizations, right? Where bad culture has rooted in, and now you have to spend $100-200 million, I think Intel used, just to line up gender pay gap, right? And so I think, if you're really serious about this work, then just go to compensation. For me, belonging is about power. Like, do you have a power? Do you have a voice? Do you have authority? And what levers, and I mean legal levers, what levers, like as a shareholder, as a board member, what legal levers do you have to actually move the needle and like affect change? And if you do that and you do that really well, I think you're going to find that your company, oh, surprise, people feel valued and people feel heard and people feel respected and honored. And then when you do the MLK, and then when you do the Cesar Chavez and the Women's March and everything, that's when you really start to show that it's authentic and it's deep rooted and you're really starting to shift culture, right? And I know people will be like, man, that's a little harsh. It is, but if MLK was alive today, and I told him, we had the most incredible march. 10 million billion people walked on Constitution and Independence Avenue, right? But we still have 2 Fortune 500 Black CEOs. Or I tell them, out of the Fortune 500, there's 356 that are Black CEOs. Which one's going to be more meaningful? Which one's going to really inspire and affect the next generation and start to really change the culture? And that's kind of my thoughts on that.
I love the passion that you bring to this conversation. And I think you're absolutely right that we need to be very active in making sure that some of these DEI initiatives isn't just another form of tokenism, right? Or it isn't that really they need to put their money where their mouth is at the end of the day. And it's not enough just to have these sort of cultural events for diversity and inclusion, but right, we need to make sure that real power and decision-making abilities are vested in the diversity of the demography served by these companies.
That's right.
So love your answer. Love it. Okay, the next question I have is for Sharika again. So Sharika, how can mentorship, I know we kind of touched upon this a little bit, but just to go further down that line, how can mentorship programs in STEM help bridge the gap for individuals from marginalized communities? And can you give us some specific strategies that you have deployed that have been effective in mentoring young professionals and students?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of mentorship, I kind of take that word with a grain of salt a lot of times because research has shown that, essentially we're over mentored and under sponsored. And what I mean by that is we can set up all of these mentorship programs across the board, especially with the big companies like H. Fuentes just talked about. I worked for the Dow Chemical Company for over 10 years, and it was essentially finding that engine that we could empower to mentor and sponsor people. And so for the rest of the folks listening, sponsorship is going to be that person that has some power, as H. Fuentes also spoke about, who's going to speak highly of you behind a closed door, right? And so who's going to be that person who is going to take you along up the promotion ladder and make sure that you're seen and that you're heard and that your ideas are valued. So if we think about some of the specific strategies to get this type of thing done, some of the things that I've done is one, people like ourselves should always make ourselves available and approachable to people who are coming in behind us, right? So if I myself go to someone as I see they're new into the company, or if I see they're coming out of graduate school, getting ready to graduate, or if I see that light bulb go off when I go and I speak in a kindergarten classroom that this kid, may have an interest in STEM, I need to make myself available and I need to make myself approachable along with the rest of my colleagues. And then after you engage these children and students along that pipeline, the next thing we need to do is we need to coach them on their why. So their why is going to give them staying power in the industry. So when I think about my why and I think about how I am called to go out and to bring in kids into STEM and students into the STEM fields, and also mentor them and sponsor them along the way, don't just leave them hanging, that gives me staying power, because I know that if I leave, then that link is going to be broken. Or if I don't empower someone else to come behind me and bridge that gap and fill that link, then all of it is for naught, because we have to keep it going. We have to keep the chain put together throughout the executive, throughout the individual contributor, all the way to the graduate student, the high school student, the 6th through 8th grader, and K through 5. It has to be a continuous link that's going to continue to pull everyone through to the top.
Okay, yes, thank you so much. Sorry, there was a hiccup with my Zoom right now.
It's okay.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's, it's a whole ecosystem, and we have to make sure that every part of it is thriving in order for it to truly be a success. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next question, just in light of time. This conversation is so rich in content, but I want to make sure that we, really get through all of these questions that I have. So Liliana, the next question is for you. We all know that representation matters, right? Like Shibari said, if you can't see it, you can't be it. So how can professional organizations like SHPE influence policy and advocate for more inclusive practices within educational institutions and STEM industries?
I think this is a phenomenal question, and I hope everybody took an opportunity to vote this week. Just on that note, right? I really would say there's 3 things giving SHPE's vision. So one is that showcasing and reporting evidence-based programming. So if it supports access to STEM education, if it's promoting gender equity, improving that college readiness, removing financial burdens, like we want to make sure that there's reports out there that are really bringing that attention to our members of Congress to show, hey, this is the effectiveness and this is how it affects your constituency volume, right? Reminding them, like, this is the fastest growing demographic in the country. They know, but again, Fuentes talked about the caps, right? We know what the representation looks like in Congress, so they need frequent and often reminders. And then, so I think the other thing would be where is their money, right? They have a lot of interest with when it comes to national security, when it comes to other things like that. So when we connect our programs and we have our pulse in the community, at the same time, we're also looking to leverage those results, right? What are some of those federal programs that are within the National Science Foundation, the Department of Education, or Energy, like that are helping their interests, but they're also removing that STEM learning or professional development barriers that we're seeing. One thing that we worked on these past couple of years is actually doing a showcase with academia and federal programs. So closing that opportunity gap in a way that where our SHIP faculty members had very direct access to representatives from those federal programs and those resources. So making sure that they had that opportunity to use them, to apply for them, to grow their own programming as well. And no, this is completely unrelated from SHIP, but just making sure that we provided a space where they could connect.
Thank you for giving us that insight into what SHIP is doing on a policy level. It's super important to have those sort of initiative multipliers, and it's always easier when you can align with what the government is also doing. The next question is for H. Prentice. So as we know, you're very focused on community engagement. So we would love to learn more about what types of community-based initiatives you have implemented at San Diego Squared that have successfully empowered individuals from diverse backgrounds to keep, pursuing those STEM education and careers. And tell us a little bit too about what were the outcomes.
Yeah. So for everybody, you could just call me H. That's like what my mother calls me, so it's like super easy. Everyone's trying to like dance on it. I'm sorry, I should have said that earlier. Just like it's really that simple. It's just H. So I've been working in diversity and inclusion since about 2016. I've worked on, I'm a serial social entrepreneur, if you will. I've raised almost $10 million across 2 projects. The first was called Connect All. I worked at an organization here in San Diego called Connect. It's like the oldest startup accelerator in the country. It's been around for like 40 years, and I ran external affairs and quickly started their first diversity and inclusion initiative called the Connect All. And essentially, we created the first diversity focused startup accelerator, and we brought it to a part of San Diego called Southeast San Diego, which is one of the most underinvested parts of San Diego. It's the only place in San Diego back in the day where Black folks could buy homes. And so it's got a real history to the city as, not being really connected to what's happening in other parts, more affluent, driven with the innovation in life sciences. And so I was able to kind of take the access to capital mentorship in those places and bring it down to communities in which they've been at the periphery for STEM for far too long. This is all sort of driven from this idea that at the end of the day, whether it's economic, social, environmental, gender disparities, all these inequities to me are driven by income inequality. And I believe that because the income doesn't rest, it's not reflective of the communities in which we live in, then that's why we have all these other disparities. And so, I'm kind of trying to address that. And the one stat that really stuck out to me in grad school was, of the 6 most valuable companies in the world in 2006, only one was a technology company, Microsoft. Fast forward to just a decade in 2016, of the 6 most valuable companies in the world, 5 out of the 6 were technology companies. So what does that tell you? That tells you that's where all the jobs are, all the capital is being created, all the wealth is being generated. And so, follow the logic, right? If I care about addressing income inequality, and this industry is creating more jobs and more capital than any in human history, but then when you break down the diversity of that industry, it is atrociously not reflective of the communities in which they operate. So then for me, if I care about environment, if I care about gender, if I care about that, then I care about increasing diversity in STEM. Because if you're able to get more people on that rocket ship taking off with all the jobs, all the capital, then maybe we'll be able to create intergenerational wealth in these communities. Then they can go fund those political candidates that they want and do all the things that people from powerful and dominant families are able to do, right? And so Connect All was really focused on increasing diversity at the beginning stages of startups, right? And so you could go, and it's 6 months of free desk space. Companies could come and build their companies. They had printers, Wi-Fi, everything. They even have a partnership where they had fresh produce brought in every week that they can eat. So they're not just having terrible snacks. They're having like fresh oranges, fresh things. There's things. And so really proud of that work. We've helped almost 1,000 companies. It's still rocking to this day. And yeah, it's been wonderful. And then I started my new project called San Diego Squared, and we are on a mission to increase diversity in STEM-driven companies. And so we're working in the talent space. And so what we're essentially doing is building the network. We 30 to 50% of all jobs are referral. And so you could be super qualified, you can be super capable, but at the end of the day, if you don't know anyone that went to Harvard or Yale or that university, if you don't know anyone that works at Dell or Illumina, right, then how are you going to get the door open for you, right? And so we synthesize the social capital that you see in communities that dominate STEM, but we recruit incredibly talented high school and college students and allow them to leverage our social capital. Right. And so it's similar to the scouting network that you see in sports. We do this very well in sports in the US, right? There's a 15-year-old girl that plays in the professional soccer league. They found Lionel Messi at 11 years old playing in Las Canchas in Argentina at 11 years old, right? There's LeBron James was on the cover of Sports Illustrated before he was even in high school, right? And so we find these incredibly talented athletes. We go to their parents and say, look, your son, your daughter could be a world champion, Olympic champion, but do they have the right training, education, support, investment, mentorship? We're going to invest a tremendous amount in your son or daughter to give them every opportunity to be a world champion. We take that model that we do very, very well in sports, but we do it for diverse talent into STEM. And so we're like the White House Fellows, the Navy SEALs of STEM, right? We are going to communities in high school and college, identify the 100 most talented high school students, college students that have really shown an excellence, a real passion for STEM that just so happen to be diverse. And then we connect them to opportunities at STEM-driven companies. And we're able to do it exceptionally well because my co-founder is an iconic biotech executive by the name of Bill Rastetter. He co-invented a cancer drug back in the 90s called Rituxan. That drug is used in over 5 million cancer patients. It's done 100 billion in sales since he created it, and still to this day does 5 or 6 billion. And then he went on to start and grow a number of companies. Why is that important? It doesn't speak to his character, although his character is phenomenal. But at the end of the day, he's made a lot of people a lot of money, right? And in an industry that's very closed off, it's very difficult to access. If you haven't made anybody any money, if you're a teacher at Lincoln High School or Morse High School or one of us on this call, and we call up Facebook or Google or Illumina, we're going to get some diversity at your teacher. We're going to get some diversity and inclusion manager that is super well-intentioned, wants to help out. But at the end of the day, you're going to get bundled up with all the other program and teachers and organizations and boys and girls clubs and junior achievement that are trying to get the support from that company, right? When we call, I'm calling from the top. I'm calling the chairman of the board, right? And at the end of the day, Bill, if I made one of y'all 200 million because I hired you as your CEO, and now you're at your next company, and I call you up looking for internships, looking for mentors, how are you going to react? You're going to react with gusto, right? You're going to act with vigor, right? And so we leverage that energy and the powerful connections that our board has very openly. We're shameless. We are building a powerful family. We find incredible talent. We connect the dots. And what we're finding is, at the beginning, I need the heavy hitter of my co-founder and the board members that we have to open up the door. But what we're finding is that now, once the door has been open and we have this incredible talent, this isn't charity, right? I got bad to the bone talent 15 minutes down the road, ship chapters full of them, just waiting to be tapped in, right? But they don't come from families that have connections. And so then now we're making these connections, and the companies over the last 2 years are now forgetting that the whole reason why they opened the door was because I was hanging out with a bunch of powerful, influential people that made a lot of people a lot of money. And instead are like, yo, H, where do I find that incredible talent? Because at the end of the day, these companies, all they need is talent. And so we're building that network, we're building that model, and our big vision is to take that and build that nationally. So you can imagine an Austin Squared, a Boston Squared, a New York Squared, Charlotte Squared, and build the Squared Foundation. So that's what we're doing.
H, so many things you said just made me so happy because as someone who works also in building that STEM talent pipeline in El Paso, also a border city, also predominantly have a very large Hispanic population and traditionally just, disbarred from participating in these high growth and high paying industries. What you said, truly, truly resonates with my experience also. And the most important thing you said was they really do need access to, more than just greasy pizzas, because I don't know who came up with this idea of that, like, business incubators and co-working spaces need to only have like pizzas stocked, because I'm definitely against that. Okay, we're gonna move on to the next question. Sharika, this is for you. Technology is continually evolving. So can you tell us how STEM education curricula can adapt to not teach only technical skills, but also cultural competence, inclusivity, and a whole suite of soft skills that can ensure that future professionals are well-rounded and aware of the diverse space that they work in?
Yeah. So I once heard when I was a junior engineer that, the soft things are the hard things. And it is so true. It's hard to teach someone like H was saying, and like Liliana was saying, it's hard to teach, the integrity. It's hard to teach that there are other people out there that look like them who are successful. And so the best way that I've seen to make this happen is to provide engineering challenges in the schools that are rooted in real world applications. And then you have someone from industry come in and monitor through those projects. And so they're going to be guided by, someone who's actively working on these things, and that can push them into an innovative space instead of just the learning space. Because what we normally see is, they have a textbook that has old problems that were the old periodic table doesn't even talk about the new things that are coming through. And they learn those things. And then when they get into industry, they're decades behind. Right. And so that's one of the things is to bring in those real world engineering challenges. And then, like I said, have diverse representatives come in and speak to these students. And as well as the top two things really on my list is for the older kids, internships. So H talked about that. Internships are really, really big. They're really, really big in preparing you for what's to come. And then for the younger kids, field trips. They always want to hear the word field trip. So it's something that gets them engaged quickly. And then there's one thing that we do here in North Texas. If you saw Claire's slides in the beginning, Region 10 was one of those big bars that you saw on all of the slides. So we really tap into the schools. We really tap into what K through 12 are doing and engage from an industry perspective. So what I do is I have kids come to work with me. And they run the company from top to bottom. They speak with the COO. They make pitches to customers and determine what should be the selling price for a different product. They go out to the manufacturing floor. They run manufacturing. They come into the R&D lab with me. They do quality. They do scheduling of the manufacturing. They do everything from top to bottom. And then they can celebrate themselves after they make a pitch and the customer decides, hey, we want to buy this product from you for this price. And they did it all themselves for that day. And so we do this every year. And in Region 10, this is a really big thing that we're doing and bringing in kids into the industry four walls and have them run things themselves.
Thank you so much, Sharika. So this is going to be the conclusion of our panel for STEM inclusivity. Thank you to all of our panelists for just such a riveting conversation and dialogue, super insightful. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. As a former teacher and advocate for STEM education, all panelists, as well as Kathy, provided robust and holistic solution-based work. And I'm excited to hear of things that are happening and can build strong momentum across the state. Moving on to our next panel, we're going to talk about demystifying STEM careers and showcasing hidden opportunities. Starting out with our first panelist, it's Alua Damilola Fashina, a graduate student researcher at Yale University, Marissa Plesia, a senior chemist with Bell International Laboratories, and finally, Dr. Brian Mendel, Division Director of Curriculum, Digital Media, and Communications at the Smithsonian Science Education Center. This panel will be led by Dalia Chaudhary, Project Coordinator at Children at Risk. We welcome all of the panelists. I see them starting to pop on.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Dahlia Chaudhary, like Claire said. I'm really excited to be here today. I'm formerly a college counselor, so this panel is super exciting to me because a lot of my students always thought of STEM careers as doctor or engineer, and we just want to showcase all these cool opportunities. We have an awesome panel today. So let's just jump right in, honestly. Dr. Mendel, I'm going to start with you. So in many cases, unconventional STEM careers require to have interdisciplinary skills. So can you share some key skills that you feel like professionals need in your field and how students and early career professionals would be able to develop those skills?
Yeah, Dahlia, thanks so much for the question, and I appreciate you starting off with a nice light one. I think one of the things that jumps out to me as I think about what are those interdisciplinary skills, um, and I was a teacher I taught middle school for 13 years, then I was a curriculum developer. I actually prior to that, did environmental consulting for a year. I was a chemist for a year, and now I'm in this like interesting role where I'm like managing the development of curriculum and whether it's like print or like digital assets. And I think as I think about STEM careers and those interdisciplinary skills, obviously research is just like a really, really critical element there. I would also say there are some of these like inter and intrapersonal skills that definitely play a really significant role. And, whether it's like flexibility or leadership or, being able to like deal with uncertainty. I think these are just some of those skills that there might not be like a class for or a course for, but are definitely like critical skills for professionals to kind of think through and really push themselves at. I would also say, because you asked about like early career professionals, um, it's funny, like when you think about like entering science, doesn't matter what the field is, there is a very rigorous process in place, but there's also a lot of like business management, project management. And you know, if Brian Mandel today could talk to Brian Mandel like, a couple of years ago, he would say, make sure you take some business or project management courses. I just think like being able to like deal with multiple variables, identifying a project plan, thinking about budgets, how do you communicate those results? I know those aren't like really alluring things when you enter a science field, but those are like really practical skills that I think can have a really big impact on your role in your first job. And it will also transcend to all these other jobs because by and large, you will probably have 4 or 5 decades of work ahead of you for those individuals entering the workforce. So thanks for the question.
Yeah, I think that was really interesting and kind of ties back to our first panel too, where we were talking about those soft skills. That's important for every career, I guess. So now to Dami. So the STEM field is evolving every single day. Can you kind of discuss any recent technological advancements or trends in your sector that are shaping the future of your field? And if you could go into after that, how aspiring professionals can prepare themselves for how like transitioning and how all the emerging opportunities that are arising.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the question. I think probably the number one thing that comes to my mind is artificial intelligence, machine learning. I think that's been mentioned a bit, but yeah, I mean, my PhD is in applied math, so I'm more on like the mathematical side of things, but definitely I think in industry, developing those skills or having that skill set will be important. I think in terms of like how you can develop these skills, there's a lot of like free online like coding tutorials, like YouTube videos. I know for myself personally, like I just watched like YouTube videos to learn Python, and that was like completely free. So there's a lot of like, retooling and reskilling like that I think people have to do in the next few years with, how fast technology is moving. Yeah. Was there another question or did I answer both?
No, that's a great answer. So that was really interesting. I think we also talked about that in the first panel. I mean, AI is changing everything and is going to be shaping what skills people are like forming. Marissa, to you. So networking and mentorship, like we talked about kind of in the last panel, are really crucial for career growth. So can you share some networking opportunities, professional organizations, or online platforms that you recommend that individuals interested in exploring transitioning into your STEM field should look into?
Yeah, exactly. So honestly, networking and mentorship honestly was something that has brought me really far in my career, and that has also truly, truly allowed me to grow, not only as a person, but as somebody in my career as well. So kind of doing both aspects of personally and professionally. So in terms of networking, I always say that networking start early. That's first and foremost the most important part when it comes to networking. I was very, very fortunate with being a cosmetic chemist, in the sense that I actually knew I wanted to be a cosmetic chemist from a very young age. Such a random career to get someone to be really obsessed with as like a little 8-year-old, but that was definitely me. So once I kind of became a student and was in high school and college, I did everything possible to try to network as much as possible with other professionals in the industry that I wanted to be in. And so kind of with that, for cosmetic chemistry specifically, there is something called the Society of Cosmetic Chemists. And honestly, no matter what type of STEM you want to be in, there will probably be a professional organization for your specific career and kind of your specific career path, right? If we're looking at some other big ones, right? American Chemical Society is a huge one, ACS, Sigma Xi is an honor society, but there are just so many professional organizations and honor societies out there that will give you the opportunity to really connect with people in your field and kind of basically allow you to learn so much about your field as well, because not only are they great for networking opportunities, but they're really great for continuing education. A lot of times they have conferences. They're really great to just kind of get a read of the trends, get where the industry is going. Great for job opportunities. There's just so many different opportunities that you get with being a part of a professional organization, such as Society of Cosmetic Chemists. Additionally, with being, in the Society of Cosmetic Chemists and professional organizations in general, something that has actually really, really been amazing for me as I have developed my career over the past couple of years is I have been very involved with it as a volunteer. And that is something that I actually highly suggest to anybody that is wanting to just kind of grow their personal career, is kind of being on the board, being in events, being involved in as much as possible, because not only are you really kind of being there and connecting with people, is that your face kind of becomes a little bit more well known, right? You get to actually, people actually know who you are. They know a little bit about you. So it's a really, really great opportunity for that. If we're talking specifically about the Society of Cosmetic Chemists, the Society of Cosmetic Chemists is a national organization with honestly chapters all over the country. From wherever you are, you'll find a chapter close by, and that is the same with most professional organizations. And so they're very easy to connect with, very easy to go to events. And I highly suggest being a part of a professional organization and being present in those events as well.
That's super interesting and great advice. And honestly, it's cool to think that you could join that even if you're not super passionate about being a cosmetic chemist, but that's such great exposure just in general. So I kind of want to bring this back to how everybody has a interesting STEM career. So this is to all of you guys, but we'll start with Dr. Mendel, if you don't mind. So can you share an experience from your unique STEM career that highlights the overlooked rewards and challenges that you face in your field, and then kind of provide some insights into what makes it distinct and fulfilling for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. And feel free to call me Brian, by the way. Let me see. When, I taught middle school for 13 years, I actually grew up outside of Philadelphia. And I think one of the things that has always stood out to me as I've gone through, I was an environmental scientist, chemist, middle school teacher, curriculum developer, and now I'm at the Smithsonian, we're creating curriculum for not just the United States market, but also international curriculum as well, based around the Sustainable Development Goals. And that was in your previous panel, it talks about the why. And I do feel when I first taught, my mentor teacher gave me a textbook that had the word science on the cover. I mean, literally it had all of science. And I asked him, I'm like, what part do you want me to teach? Is it life science, physical science, engineering? And he's like, you're teaching science. So that's a pretty daunting task for 1 year to cover. And over the years, I have seen a big shift in how we are introducing and like providing context around these topics so that they're more relevant for youth. Because if they're not relevant for youth, they're not going to care. They're not going to be engaged. And I would say over the years, we've really tried to like push the envelope on providing the why. It's not just like understanding the chemistry of the atmosphere, but like understanding how it's changing, how is it impacting individuals' lives, and then what can you do about it? And if you can create that connective tissue, I really feel like you build that like agency with youth. So I would say, having been like a high school student many years ago, just thinking through all these difficult science concepts and wondering about the why. And then literally like yesterday, my school system where I went to, they reached out. They didn't even know like I went there. And they're like, hey, Brian, we saw that you have this interesting international curriculum called Smithsonian Science for Global Goals. That Pennsylvania just adopted new standards that have environmental literacy and sustainability as like core elements. And they're like, we'd love for you to come and just talk a little bit about how you're writing stuff related to environmental literacy and sustainability. And I forwarded it to my mom. I was like, this is going to be crazy. But it was really, for me, it was like a really interesting like loop. So I'm really excited to kind of go back and just talk a little bit about some of the work that we're doing. And it also speaks to like the non-linearity of STEM careers. You can contribute to STEM in lots of different ways. So for me, I feel like that was really interesting and personally fulfilling. So that's a great question.
Yeah, and so I'll just pose the same one, Dami, if you could answer. Do you remember the question, or do you want me to repeat it?
Yeah, I think you were asking about like rewarding experiences that maybe make this worthwhile. So yeah, that was a great answer, Brian. I think for me, so I'm actually still like in the middle of the PhD process, I guess. And I think I think it's a nice like intellectual journey. So I think a lot of times you get thrown into industry and like, you can work on something cool, but PhD kind of gives you this nice buffer or time to kind of like really explore and dive into something that you may not have the time to do later. So I think that's a really unique opportunity. I think secondly, you also, hopefully like if you graduate and publish, you're sort of contributing to the edge of human knowledge, which is kind of like, that's like non-trivial. So I think that's like a really cool aspect of the PhD process. I think on the counter side, just to paint the full picture is, you will see a lot of your friends in industry, making a lot of money, kind of rising through the ranks. So there's that to consider. But yeah, overall, I think it's like really fulfilling and satisfying process.
Going to you next, Marissa.
Yeah. So cosmetic chemistry is actually a really, really fun industry and a really interesting industry because it is very applicable. I say this honestly all the time, but if you think about it, every single one of you, every single person pretty much in this world has daily used a product that a cosmetic chemist has made. And the reason behind that is because cosmetic chemistry is not just makeup, right? Cosmetic chemistry is skincare, personal care, body washes, toothpastes, pretty much any sort of personal care product that you use daily, a cosmetic chemist has formulated. So what I really love about being a cosmetic chemist is that honestly, I could go to the shelves of a store, I could go online, I could go anywhere and be like, I made that product, or I know somebody that did do it. And what's really exciting for me is that I learned very early on in my college and my education that I was a chemist, that I didn't want to be necessarily in the lab all the time. And I did not really want to as well kind of work on a project for who knows how long and not necessarily have like that application to it, not really have that physical product, not really have that yet, kind of, more theoretical versus applicable application. And so being a cosmetic chemist, what it allows you to do is kind of be like, yeah, I have kind of almost rewards all the time with my career, because since I'm working for brands, I'm working for companies, I could literally be like, okay, well, I'm formulating a new SPF product. And then I could literally go to the shelves of Target and be like, oh my God, I did this. So it's really, really fun, honestly, because it is kind of giving you almost like these instant gratification, these instant rewards, these ideas that, you know, like what I am doing, people are actually using. And that's really, really exciting for me. And that's the type of personality that I honestly have. In the meantime, too, it allows for a lot of cosmetic chemistry is a very creative outlet. You know, it really kind of brings together science and creativity and art. And so I always say beauty science is honestly art. And so those are kind of like why it's like so exciting and it's honestly so fun to be in this industry. Not necessarily a challenge. I mean, it is a challenge depending, but I think because we're such a consumer focused industry, there can be a lot of discussions and topics and all kinds of debates and everything back and forth with consumers and what consumers are looking for. You know, we are very, very into the marketing, obviously, in this industry, very into consumers are highly aware of what they are putting on their body, which they should be. But there is a lot of discussion on that. And kind of with that can become some issues with scientific communication. And so I think it's very important to, as anyone in STEM, to really look at your science communication skills because consumers are looking to us for information. And I think that's really important, especially in the day of age with influencers and marketing teams and all of that. We really do have to look at scientists and honestly also regulations as well through government, et cetera. So it's very important, those kinds of aspects. So.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I feel like that goes back to science education. Like, how are we building up this next generation so that they are conscious consumers? So that kind of leads me actually to Brian. So STEM education is really important in playing a role of who our future workforce is going to be. So how can educators in our educational institutions incorporate knowledge about these lesser known STEM careers into curriculum, or like better expose students to these types of careers?
Yeah, I think that's like the $1 million question. From my perspective, the more we can embed these stories of these scientists into the point of use in the curricular resources, whether it's like an activity guide, a PBL, even like a digital asset, an ebook, the more you can provide a high level overview about who these people are, and not just like a picture of them next to their Nobel Prize. Like, who are these individuals as people? You know, one of the things we do in our Smithsonian Science for Global Goals guides is we have our students create identity maps. You know, who are you? Like, where'd you grow up? Do you have siblings? They can share a whole suite of like other information. And they build on these identity maps. Like, how much are they connected to the content that they're being exposed to in these guides? Like, how much are you aware of mosquito-borne diseases or like nutrition deserts? Like, what is your awareness of those things? And we've also asked scientists and engineers who we highlight in these guides to create identity maps so that when the students are reading about these scientists, they can go to their identity map and like, oh, I like chocolate. I like peanut butter and chocolate. I like Reese's. So does this. So does she. She likes it too. And it makes it more applicable and more real. And I think as long as they see somebody that looks like them, the more apt they are to kind of take that like intellectual risk and really like push themselves. So I would say it is an absolute priority to embed these things at the point of use, like when they're ready, when it's relevant, and also to be sure to capture stories, not just from like the Western perspective, but all around the world. I just think there's information deserts here as well as when you're creating resources, and I think you really have to push yourself to make sure you're capturing those stories that are often left like untold. So I think that is the responsibility of educators. I think it's the responsibility of curriculum developers, and it's the responsibility of like school systems when they're looking for resources that they make it a criteria in their adoption process. If they really care about it, you'll see it in there. So that's a great question.
Thank you so much. Dami, we'll close out with you. Just thinking about how STEM is very collaborative across disciplines. Can you share an example of a collaborative project or initiative that exemplifies the interdisciplinary nature of your field? And if you have time, how it contributed to advancements?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. So applied math is inherently a general discipline, I'd say. You can apply math to anything. I think, off the top of my head, just like data science applications, maybe like you have an image and you want to detect a tumor, and you want to put the image through some machine learning model so you can predict whether or not that image has a tumor. So I've, done things like that. Not successful yet. But I think, AI applied to just like medical images. I think maybe a more tangible example, my bachelor's was nuclear engineering, but my master's was medical physics. So I was doing a lot of like radiation detection stuff for nuclear security applications. And the same physics can actually be applied to, again, detect like tumors in breast images or, brain images. So just like radiation detection, unifying those two different fields. So yeah, I think that's what's kind of cool about science. I think the other panelists kind of mentioned, alluded to this too. It's like very interdisciplinary inherently. Yeah.
Awesome. That was great. We actually have a couple more minutes. So Marissa, I just want to get you in one last time. Can you share just maybe a few bites of advice for high school students or college students who are interested in your field or just generally in STEM?
Yeah. Well, I think my number one advice always, right, is to actually look for those professional organizations such as SUC or ACS or anything. And honestly, the reasoning behind it, I said it before, is but it really does open the doors to so much networking and also just kind of education and interest in general. And might as well, if you're a high school student, learn about that industry before you go into it and see if it's actually something that you do want to do. So there is many opportunities for that. I also think, and I do actually think LinkedIn is a really, really good source for anybody, but especially high schoolers and early careerists, because there are so many people out there that are looking for, honestly, to be a mentor to students out and early careerists. So, you can connect with people. Don't be afraid to connect with people on LinkedIn and look to see what they're doing. Maybe shoot them a message. Hey, like, do you have time for a quick talk, or can we email back and forth, or I'm really inspired by your career, can we discuss this together? So I really think, honestly, one of my biggest advices is to just not be afraid to put yourself out there, not be afraid to reach out. And I know, honestly, as sometimes scientists and in STEM, we tend to be sometimes a little bit more reserved. There are those little things there in terms of personalities, but honestly, it really, really will puts you much farther in your career as if you are connecting with people and socializing in that way. So
awesome. That was so insightful. Thank you guys all, Dami, Brian, and Marissa, for being here. We really appreciate it. And I'm going to hand it back over to Claire.
So just to echo Dahlia, thank you so much to that panel. It's funny that Marissa says it's more reserved because I see a shift in this summit of outward voices. I'm excited to have those listening utilize the resources and explore more opportunities. Moving on to our next panel, it seems like a seamless transition since Brian was mentioning that STEM careers aren't linear and there's opportunities for teachers to express that in their classrooms and really build robust systems in their four walls. On this next panel, Strengthening STEM Teacher Pipelines, Public and Private, oh my gosh, tongue twister, partnerships in STEM education. We have our moderator, Nicholas Mendoza, leading the discussion. Nicholas is the school founder of Alchemy Studio and Labs. Joining Nicholas, we have a robust panel starting with Arthur Mitchell, Executive Director of the STEM Equity Alliance, Jamie Hellengoder, Program Director of School Empowerment Network, and Dr. Michael Odell, Professor of STEM Education and the Endowed Ross Chair in Education at the University of Texas at Tyler. So I will hand it over to Nicholas.
Awesome. Thanks, Claire. And thanks, y'all, for jumping into this conversation. As someone who is in the process of founding a school, I am super excited to learn a little bit more about how y'all are approaching strengthening the STEM teacher pipeline. So let's jump right in with Dr. Odell. And Dr. Odell, teacher retention is a big concern across the country. How can industry partnerships contribute to creating a supportive environment for STEM teachers? And could you share any examples of successful public-private partnerships that have successfully done this?
Sure. The first one that comes to mind, of course, is the partnerships that the Communities Foundation of Texas has brokered with TEA, and they have a number of industry partners to support STEM. And that goes back to the Texas High School Project back in the early 2000s and has led all the way up to the P-TECH schools and things that you see like that today. And they've done a lot to support that initiative. Also, I would think the other would be, I don't know why my printer is suddenly making noise, but that's weird. Anyway, those things happen, right? The other would be for the the early career folks, the pre-service types. The UTeach program has partnered with a number of different industry sponsors in the past, as well as TEA and others, to support the development and recruit students into the STEM programming areas, as far as high school, especially high school teachers. And the main point of that partnership was to get universities to understand that they are essential in creating teachers, but students have to be able to graduate in 4 years with that credential, which was always the struggle. And you see states like California, they just made it a 5-year program, and given salaries and things of that nature, that makes it kind of problematic. So those are two sort of examples that come to mind.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing. And I'll go to Arthur next. Arthur, as the Executive Director of STEM Equity Alliance, you've likely seen various challenges. What strategies have you found effective in attracting individuals from diverse backgrounds into STEM education? And how can public-private partner initiatives and partnerships proactively identify individuals and support them?
Yeah, that's a pretty large question there. So I'm going to break it up into a couple of different pieces. The notion of a STEM pipeline can sometimes be a bit of a misnomer, especially going into teacher education, into education. Yeah, we do have this broad STEM pipeline that we want a lot of people to get into. We've been talking for years about using that leaky pipeline metaphor and what it means to put in people at one end, and then we get this product at the other end, and all these things occur along the way. And that presumes that the pipeline is kind of passive in some ways, and the leaks are just these unfortunate events, when this is really a design issue and a design problem in STEM in general, and why we're facing STEM shortages across the board when it comes to having a talent pipeline in the United States. And so education is just another facet of the pipeline that needs better attention. And so when I think about moving people all the way through and diversifying that pipeline, and which is really where we focus in a lot, getting STEM teachers in the classrooms, so that university pathway that goes straight from a K-12 experience to an undergraduate experience is one thing. But also we have to look at what it means to get these second career folks in and career changers. I work with a school right now that none of the math and science teachers came through an undergraduate to graduate teaching experience. They're all career changers. And that's something that we really have to think a lot about, that we're not looking at the same models that we had 30 years ago and saying those are going to be effective models. We have to have models which fit what education and what career changing looks like today. But going back to kind of to your original question, those things that are most effective really take advantage of regions and what regional impacts look like, so that we have regional intentionality. The notion of intentionality is hugely important in this space, because if we are just leaving it up to the systems as they currently exist, we're going to continue to get the same results. And so we do have to have some regional intentionality, which is looking to produce a more robust workforce from a K-12 perspective, broadening participation and then moving them into these regional centers at the university level. And then once again, an intentionality that part of the STEM career workforce, part of the STEM workforce is an education workforce. If we separate the education workforce from the STEM workforce, then we're missing an integrated conversation that needs to occur, especially at the university level, where our math and science teachers are coming in, but to math and science degree programs, and then they have to be handed off to education programs.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing so many incredible reflections and just so many connections to, things that I've heard in the past couple hours, particularly in terms of the disconnect between what is on students' desks or on their computers currently and what's actually happening in the field. And so to that point, let's go to Jamie. In your role at School Empowerment Network, you likely work closely with educators. And so how can industry partnerships enhance professional development opportunities for current STEM educators so that we can ensure that they stay updated with the latest advancements, teaching methodologies, both pedagogy and content?
Yeah, thank you, Nicholas, and thank you for having me today. I think to answer this question well, there are just a few potentially hard truths that have to be acknowledged. And that is that most of our teachers currently are products of the K-12 system that is producing the results that we saw at the beginning of our webinar today. And I think the second difficult truth is that we're asking those same teachers to prepare students to enter environments that they're not familiar with. Teachers largely, whether they are traditionally trained by universities or trained, as Arthur was talking about, by what we call ACPs, Alternative Certification Programs for Career Changers, their training focuses on the practice of teaching. It focuses on pedagogy and it focuses on instructional strategy. And those are really important elements of their training. And we have only recently begun to acknowledge and be intentional about the acknowledgement that teachers are not really being trained in the content that they're teaching. And I loved what Arthur said about educators being part of the STEM workforce. So STEM teachers are part of the STEM workforce. And there's another hard truth here, and that is that the most qualified STEM professionals are not choosing to go into K-12 education. K-12 education doesn't compete well for engineers. And so I think if we put all those things on the table and we think about where industry can support us, for starters, when industry acknowledges and accepts that they're getting the best talent, if they also call themselves to action to share the content expertise with educators through professional development opportunities, I think that's one way in which we can kind of bridge some of this gap. I think the extent to which we can make mentorships and programs available to teachers and campus leaders, not just K-12 students, that's really important, and also to scale and be sustainable, really teaching and training the folks who are teaching and training them over the long term is a really important element here. And then I loved when H earlier was speaking about folks who are calling and asking industry for help. And I thought, let's get those folks networking with one another, because teachers learn a lot from one another. So if they are able to participate in some sort of industry-driven professional learning where they're learning technology, where they're learning, the content of a particular branch of science, and then they are able to network with one another, that makes implementation a lot more likely and a lot more possible.
Awesome. Thank you as well for sharing. We'll jump to Dr. Odell. And Dr. Odell, in your experience, diversity and inclusion are essential in education. What specific strategies have you observed or implemented that successfully attract and retain teachers, particularly from underrepresented communities? And how can these strategies be scaled up, or can they be scaled up in partnership with private industry partners?
The can is always the interesting question. I can talk a little bit about some initiatives that are going on For example, there's an initiative called Get the Facts Out. I don't know if you folks have ever heard of that one, but it's sponsored by the National Science Foundation, but it's a national initiative to recruit STEM majors into teaching by providing them the actual facts about the jobs, the amount of pay they get, the kind of house they can afford, and all of the summer opportunities that are provided teachers, and things like externships and things like that they may not be aware of, and then actually do the comparisons that if you go to work for an engineering company, you may start at $80,000, $90,000, whatever it is, but that's for 12 months versus a teacher can start in the Dallas area for 60 something, and that's for 9 months, and then what you can afford. And if you want to have a family balanced life, you get a pension versus not getting, and then targeting groups that, especially first generation college students, to show that this is a way to, pipeline is not the right word, but to build a pipeline of folks into those diverse communities. Now, of course, in Texas, we're a majority state. So the bulk of our students are Hispanic already. We could definitely do better recruiting African-American students into the teaching pipeline. That would be a program. And what's really cool about it is pretty much anyone can be a part of it. And they give you all the recruiting materials that have been market tested by advertising agencies for their effectiveness. And then you can adapt those to recruit not just into like a certification program, but to actually come work in your school. And anyone that knows how certification works in Texas, for example, 60% of the teaching force comes through the alternative route, which means that they are coming back from industry or other types of fields. And so, but that, if I had to pick one that I think is really unique and innovative, it would be the Get the Facts Out program. That would be helpful.
Great. And then Arthur, let's jump to you. A similar question. Anything there that jumps out in terms of how the industry can retain diverse individuals? Also, how can industry professionals serve as potential effective mentors for STEM educators or interested STEM educators?
Yeah, the industry support. So the notion of an ecosystem and industry being a partner in an education ecosystem is hugely important. In one respect, they're end users, right? So they're looking at how do they use a system in their region in order to produce their workforce. And in order to do that, they need to have a dependable education system that is going to help to do that. I mean, even though, your major industries, of course, they can draw from a global workforce, but at the same time, they have a stated interest in developing local and regional workforces as well. And so, they have a bully pulpit around that. As H was saying, they also have funding where they can fund lots of different types of activities, but it is a matter of them being active in those spaces and not just kind of pouring money into an empty, into this bowl, but really targeting funds for directed activities that are going to do things like strengthening what teachers, not just a teacher pipeline, but strengthen teachers and who teachers are, what they're doing, and teacher output, which is, hugely important. It's not just getting more bodies into spaces. It is the quality of who's in those spaces and then the experiences that they have. And so when you pair that with mentorship, mentorship from an industry serves multiple opportunities. Of course, it is opportunities for diversity and for students to see people who look like them in some of these spaces if they put them in communities and they meet with students. And so now we've seeded the idea that so here, I can get into this industry spaces, which we heard in some of these panels, that we have that type of modeling. But also when we have educators need, especially your math and science educators, your technology engineering educators, they need to be tied into professional community. And part of their professional community are the jobs that they actually do, and being tied into, well, here's what's actually happening now. We can use these things as models. I understand what's happening in the industry. I can do an externship as a teacher working in a company. Not only does that possibly put more money in my pocket, but it also connects me to the authenticity of what's happening right now in my field, so that I'm transmitting that to my students and transmitting the way that the industry actually works. Whatever's in the book that I'm using is already obsolete. So what's actually happening right now that I can translate into classroom activities so that my students can get the type of project-based, problem-based learning that's solving authentic problems the way that industry professionals will solve those problems, and therefore opening up real opportunity for students to see how the STEM world works.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing. I'm taking my own notes here. I mean, this idea of active versus passive funding and the impact, the difference in the impact that can have. And then there's this connection to quality of educator, which is a broader challenge, but for STEM really peaks itself out. We need to professionalize the discipline. And as that happens, you will see, we will attract more quality people. To that point, Jamie, in your experience, actually, let's talk about funding, because it's a challenge in education initiatives. Can you elaborate on innovative funding models that you've seen employed in public-private partnerships that have specifically supported STEM teacher training?
This is a tough question because school funding is, I would argue, unnecessarily complex. But I'm going to tell you what innovation looks like in one of the schools that I support. So in my role, I work with school leadership teams to develop and implement STEM models. And I currently support a school in the Coastal Plains region of the state. And here's what innovation looks like there when they're trying to get funding for STEM work. The leadership team, so the principal and the assistant principal and the instructional coaches, each take a day at the beginning of the school year, and they literally pound the pavement. So they literally go out to STEM-related businesses in the area, and they plead their case, and they ask for help in the form of funding and the form of volunteers, mentorships, et cetera. And so I think that's a pretty innovative approach. And also, I share that example because that's what it looks like on the ground. And so I think a lot of what we have out there in terms of our current funding initiatives are so large scale and inaccessible to the people closest to the ground who are trying to do this work. And those are principals and teachers. And so I think if we're going to think about funding initiatives, here's what I would offer. One, I would be looking to get that money as close to the ground as possible. Large scale grants are often very difficult. First of all, for school leadership teams to find, to understand, and then to apply for. And then they often are short-lived. So the other thing I would ask is that we're looking for things that require, for example, trainer of trainer models. My opinion is that investment in development is the best investment we can make. You can have a really robust STEM program that is not dependent on fancy tech tools or 3D printers, right? And so the more that we can train educators in authentic STEM pedagogy and invest in that type of training and require that scales and sort of like lives on. I think those are wise investments. And I would just encourage us to remove as many barriers as possible. So the number of entities from the source of money to the people spending it needs to be dramatically reduced.
I have a comment. There's a little known pot of money that recently became available that would be very helpful to people. I think the Department of Labor now allows you to create, through the Texas Workforce Commission, apprentice programs where the money does not go through TEA, the money does not go through education, But you have to approach your local workforce development boards to make the case. They have to add it to their repertoire of apprentice programs. And then if the state does get money to help support those, and TEA is just now getting involved, but you can also get your money directly from the Department of Labor through the workforce side, which has never been a possibility before. And that's a national program. I almost hate to tell it because we're working on our applications right now. But I think that is a very it's something I would recommend people to look into, because it's a new. It truly is workforce money, which education has never been a priority on that list. So FYI.
Awesome. Martha, were you about to jump in as well, or?
I wasn't jumping in. I was just applauding the tie-in between education and workforce and going to the Department of Labor and all the workforce investment boards. I mean, when we're talking ecosystem, that is the ecosystem. Education ecosystem tends to close itself down to only education, but it is really the broader ecosystem that has all the same goals. We just don't get together and meet and strategize. We need a systems approach to all of this work. And that systems approach means that we're looking at the mutual benefits that every partner has, that every actor has in this work, in order to get to these outcomes. And ultimately, children at risk, it's putting the students at the center. So we have to have a student-centered approach to this, and what it means to move those students into viable, family-sustaining, careers, of which STEM is the foundation for so many of them, but our diverse student populations just often don't have access, and that's not by accident. So we have to really engineer this differently in order to get better and different outcomes. And so I know that the work that you're doing as an organization, why you're putting this together, the people you have on. I mean, I know we're going to be followed by Reagan Flowers, who's doing this on the ground in Houston in so many tremendous ways. This is sponsored by Shell, and Shell is a major sponsor of, Brian Mandel is on with the Smithsonian and their work around STEM teacher diversity. Fraser Wilson's going to bring all this home. I mean, those people and those partnerships are vital to this work. And we just can't overstate enough the need to focus on diversity, because if you get the diversity thing right, then all the other problems actually are solved as downstream problems.
Awesome. On that note, that was a word, and I appreciate it. And I appreciate y'all again. I've learned so much. I have a full page of notes here. And that is just what it's all about, is learning. And so thank you to Children at Risk. And again, thanks y'all. And I will pass it back to Claire.
Awesome. Thank you, Nicholas, and to all of our panelists. As Arthur mentioned, we have our last but certainly not least final keynote speaker, Dr. Reagan Flowers, who is the Chief Education Officer of the Sustainable Forestry Initiative. Reagan Flowers will be taking us through a journey of breakthroughs in renewable energy, sustainable agriculture, environmental conservation, and resilient infrastructure. I will pass it over to you, Dr. Flowers, and we look forward to your conversation.
Claire, thank you. And I want to say it's been a joy working with you, and I so appreciate your ability to keep me on task. All of the crew over at Children at Risk, always happy and excited to participate in these types of forums to add value, and looking forward to just sharing a little bit about the space of sustainability and the future as it relates to STEM innovations, global impact, and how that ties to, our classrooms, our teachers, and the students that we are, I guess, developing to lead the way so that we have a future that we can look forward to. And so I'm looking here and adjusting here. So the theme, thank you. You guys have me handled. I appreciate you. Building sustainable futures, STEM innovations, and global impact. It's heavy duty, and I'm so glad I was able to get in on that last panel, and it was so wonderful seeing so many great familiar faces, and that we share in this work together, and particularly work very closely with Arthur, and so many great points that just really segue nicely into what I'm going to share with you all today. So when we look at STEM innovations, from where I sit in my experiences, Arthur shared about the work I do on the ground in Houston in my role at CSTEM. Yes, the founder of CSTEM, and now currently a board member as I've taken on a global role with the Sustainable Forestry Initiative. And that's allowing me to have a larger footprint as we grow up the talent and really try to save our planet. And it's all largely going to hinge on STEM innovations and creating this future that we can maintain our planet, which is really, really critical. And it's SFI. That's what we're doing. We are advancing sustainability, but through the lens of forest-focused collaborations, using forest as the windows on the world. And in taking on this role, just really learning how critical our forests are in ensuring that we have a future, and how critical it is in helping our educators understand, how to bring in this environmental literacy and conversations and work around sustainability to grow up this talent and to lead in our classrooms, and to have these very thoughtful individuals grow up to take the baton and continue to lead the way. And so with this next slide, I really enjoy this one because it's a great way to really make it real and plain. So if you guys can read this comic, I really love it. And I love it because it's a great example of the tragedy of the commons. And so when you look here, you read through it, you have these farmers, they come together and they say, oh, there's such great potential here, we should put a few cows out here, put some cows on this land. And, it's great. And so, they add the cows, and then, as things go, they start to, generate some sales, generate some revenue, right? And so they say, this is a pretty good deal here. So I think we should add a few more cows, because we add a few more cows, we can, raise our profit margins by 10%. And so, hey, that's what we do. We add more cows to that common, pasture that we share. And then a few months later, we add a few more cows, right? And then what we're left with is a pasture that's of land that has been overly grazed, right? We've abused that resource, and we've not utilized it in a way that we can share and ensure that that resource is available for us, for the future. And so we commonly, then I say the commonly in terms of the tragedy of the commons, we do these types of things, we have these types of practices, not realizing it, and a lot of it's driven by our bottom line. And when we look at, what's happening here, in such an instance, we have, just tremendous, increases here with, greenhouse gases, our planet is, it's so hot. And with with the changes in the heat, it impacts us so much, when we look at even in workspaces, we have issues where it's just too hot to work, and we don't think about, well, if it's too hot to work, what does that do to our economy? That's estimated loss of $1.7 billion annually when you're dealing with heat conditions where people just cannot get out and work. And then we look and we watch the news and we see how on these coastal shores, how these homes are falling into the water because we've got these sea levels that are rising. And so, these are all critical issues around our planet and sustainability, but so critical in terms of our classrooms and our teachers understanding and us advocating more for environmental literacy and what we can do to really build up those who can, move things forward in a very productive way for us all. And so here we go, I didn't, through CSTEM, I started in this work of environmental stewardship, human impact on the environment through my work with sea turtles through our curriculum. And through that curriculum, pre-K through 12, have been able for years now to really impress upon teachers and children how important it is in terms of our decisions, our practices, and what we're doing, and its impact on the sea turtle and them being an endangered species and a species that's been around since before the dinosaur. And so never did I think, from being a classroom science teacher to leading a STEM program like CSTEM and to now Chief Education Officer for the Sustainable Forestry Initiative, would I be looking at these issues more deeply in working to bring this information to teachers, to classrooms across the globe, and looking at things that we're having to deal with collaboratively as a world, not just here in Houston or to Texas or specific states, but we're having to deal with issues around the sustainability development goals across the globe. And because anything that we're doing, whether you're in Texas, is affecting other states, is affecting other countries, because we're all breathing the same air and it travels, right? We're all needing, good quality water. We're needing good working conditions. We're needing, research and innovations. And so here we have where we have developed, the UN, the United Nations, has developed these 17 sustainable development goals, which are very clear, which are really, our marching orders. It's our to-do list. This is what we're using to guide our practices of, what it is that we're going to do, and how these things are tied in relationship to enterprise, to business, and the environment, and how we have to be better stewards of that which we're taking out and that which we're putting back in. So to talk a little bit about SFI, we're managing largely all of the forests here across the country. And when you look at that, and we're all hearing about carbon credits, we're hearing about carbon footprint, we've got to reduce that, we've got to get to net zero, what we're taking out, we've got to put back, we've got to, find balance. And so one of the ways that we're doing this is through our management of forests, and that's, as you can see here, very large amount of carbon here, right? That we're managing here through our forests across the North America, I would say. And then to make it even more plain, we all drive cars or we're using modes of public transportation depending on where you are. But in Texas, we are definitely a big truck, automobile state. And it's very common to find a household that may have 2 to 3 cars. And so we're not concerned about those emissions. We're not, concerned about, that which we're putting out here into the air and air quality. And so to make it more plain, when we talk about the 20 billion tons of carbon that our forests alone, our certified forests, are storing, you take a look and you just pare that down and you use the examples of the cars. And when you look at it's more carbon stored based on our managed forests that equates to more than 30 billion cars in a year. And so that's making it real and plain. But even with that amount of work, it's still not enough to get us where we need to be based on the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals, and that which the Paris Agreement initiated for us to follow, and that which we have to achieve by 2050. So listening to the panel ahead of my coming on to speak with you all today, there's a lot of conversations about partnering. Collaboration is so critical. We talk about it largely in the space of education, with funding, with access to opportunities, to understand, what are the needs of the world? What are the things that a Shell Oil company is dealing with, for example? How do we translate that back to our classrooms? How do we create those experiential learning opportunities? How do we really grow up the talent of the future, of those green jobs and those green spaces? And it happens through collaboration. And it's really the only way that it's going to happen successfully, because we've got so much work to do that we can't do it individually or in one-offs, or one specific organization or one teacher or one school. It's a collaborative effort. And so here at SFI, yes, we can brag about the amount of carbon that our forests is storing, 20 billion tons. That's large, but it's done through collaborations, and that's, through so many different sectors and spaces, from conservation to various, community partnerships, of course, through education and so much research. So that equates to about 800 unique partnering organizations that is supporting the work we're doing around, carbon capture with, biodiversity and making sure that we're having clean water. And so, we talk, everyone's heard the saying, or not, maybe not everyone, but largely you've heard the saying that, all politics is local. Well, I definitely say in this space of sustainability, it begins local. It's local action that leads to global impact. And largely that is in this space of STEM education. This work that we're doing, in STEM, it starts, with our classrooms. It starts with us changing our behaviors and how we think about things, how we see the world, how we take responsibility individually about our actions, our decisions, but also how we care about what we're leaving behind and what we're developing to be good stewards of what we're leaving behind. And largely everything starts with education. There's no physician, there's no engineer, there's no city worker, cafeterias, police crossing guard, that it didn't start with education. So everything begins there. And through education, this is where we develop these leaders and innovative minds to help come up with more renewable energy, ideas and resources. We can applaud the work we're seeing in the renewable space, when we look at solar, wind, geothermal, all of the hydrogen energy. There's just so much that we're seeing in that renewable space, when it comes to the types of innovation that is required so that we can approach our energy needs in a cleaner way, in a way that's taking better care of our planet. And so we also see in STEM education, there's such a need to create these innovative minds that can also look at more biodegradable options. We have really messed up when it comes to plastics. I mean, when you talk about plastics, we're using more plastics than we are steel, metal, and coal. So plastics have taken over, and of course, there's nothing we can do with with these one-use plastics. They're not biodegradable, and so we're really pushing hard on recycling and reusing. But just think about an education, if we can give these students and teachers access to the resources and the lab spaces and the technology to really rethink how do we use natural resources that are biodegradable, that will work well with our planet, and that are plant-based, natural fibers that can really help us be better stewards of our planet. It all starts in our classrooms. It starts with our teachers. It starts with our children. And largely when you talk about those underserved, underrepresented populations, largely our Black and brown children, they're underexposed to these opportunities. These conversations aren't being had in a lot of their classrooms. Those partnerships with businesses largely are not there to really help with the upskills as it relates to the teacher development, in terms of getting the resources that are there and just the exposure to see it, because we all know you can't see or be, that which, you can't dream of being anything that you've never seen, or you've not been exposed to. So a little more about SFI's lifetime of learning. And this is our approach as we're doing great work in the sustainability space. And with our lifetime of learning pillar, education pillar, this is how we're spanning across that I call the pre-K through 20 pipeline development or pathway. And that's heavily focusing on pre-K 12 through 12 education resources, working on forest literacy, largely dealing with adults and upskilling, and particularly, looking at things differently, even from through the lens of how do we create more urban forest, and was recently a recipient of some of the IRA funding that came down to help build up and create these urban forests and spaces. And so there'll be a lot of great opportunities for jobs there and upskilling. And these are things that we have to make sure we're connecting and to our classrooms, to our schools, and to our teachers, so that they understand and know that such opportunities are out here that, were not jobs of the past, but definitely jobs of the future. And then, of course, that dovetails nicely into our career pathways, where we're focusing heavily on getting talent out there. Some of our guides here, this is how we do it. So yes, we're talking high level. We talk about sustainability. We talk about the UN Sustainable Development Goals, Paris Agreement, all these things. It's heavy conversation. But what we have to do is we take those heavy conversations and issues and we bring it down to a level where our teachers and our children can take it in, they can absorb it, and they can learn how to think about these issues differently. And so this is in part how we're doing it through our various guides. And so, how does it happen? I look at, a lot of what was said in the panel ahead is working together. It's working collaboratively and coming up with innovative STEM solutions that we can use to ensure that we have a sustainable planet. And it's not something we can leave to chance. It's something that we've got to invest in, and it starts within our classrooms with teacher development, putting those resources, getting those field experiences out there so that we understand how to think about these issues and how to create innovative STEM solutions to move us forward, basically. And that's what I have, folks. Would love, I don't know if we have time for questions, but if there is opportunity, happy to entertain any questions.
Dr. Flowers, thank you so much for giving the context and really wrapping together the whole summit into one presentation around sustainability. As someone who keeps the daunting fear of the climate in the back of their mind and see a lot of headlines, basically with a ticking time clock of what we have and what we could do, I feel very trapped as just one member of society of what my impact is, besides recycling or trying to fight through paper straws. What are ways that you suggest those that really want to see big actionable items, or students even in schools, on how they can take the first step to impact?
Thank you. And Claire, what you shared is felt by so many across the globe. This fear, feeling like we've hit a wall. And so when you think about things as simple as, and I'm guilty of this, so I've been, through my new leadership role, I've had to rethink how I'm making decisions. When we think about what we can do differently with how we order things. I've been guilty. I'm on Amazon, I'm ordering from some clothing store, and I'll say, well, I'll order a couple of sizes, one of them will fit, and then I'll ship the other one back. But I don't think about the pollution associated with that. I don't think about that was an extra a truck, on the road coming back to take this product. And then this product may go back to the manufacturer, but it may not sell. And so now you have these landfills filled with clothing that are as tall as Mount Everest. And so if we can rethink how we are consumers, largely that helps. And we don't see it as much, because we don't see those emissions and exhausts that are coming out through our air conditioning unit or from our cars. But if we think about, okay, if we can meet virtually as opposed to driving across town, if we can, definitely recycle, just be more thoughtful in just those habits. You're making an impact. That's why I say local action has global impact, and those things, and just the fact that you're being thoughtful about it and it's weighing on you, that means you are making changes and your thinking and behaviors are changing to support a better planet.
That is awesome and definitely something I needed to hear as an Amazon hoarder. Thank you, Dr. Flowers, for this. I'm excited and encouraged to hear sustainable forestry initiative entering into K-12 spaces and empowering more teachers to show the impact and the why of their classrooms.
Thank you.
Awesome. And that concludes. I do know that Dr. Fraser Wilson, Shell USA Company Foundation and Manager, Workforce Development and Diversity Outreach at Shell USA.
Hello, everyone. How you doing? I appreciate your patience. I'm double hatting. I'm at another meeting I need to step out of, so appreciate your patience and also all the great feedback I've heard during the time I've been able to listen in. I definitely want to thank all the panelists and participants for your excellent session, and really our partners at Children at Risk for pulling everyone together. The collaboration in STEM, it's key for Shell and for Houston as we continue to build our future workforce, understanding that the importance of encouraging students' creativity and innovation is needed to create resilience and sustainability. And at Shell, we understand the importance of partnering with teachers who have the power to encourage and empower lives to provide the vital energy that we need, especially having young people to challenge ways of operating to bring around new innovations and new ways of addressing the needs of our community. Our ability to provide energy is really dependent on the relationship and the partnership that exists between our education system as well as our corporate community. As a global company, we understand the importance of diversity as well as we continue to look at these efforts to create diverse and inclusive companies. And at Shell, we're still striving to be the most diverse and inclusive company that we can be and be a model for other companies in that space. We try to accomplish these things through our efforts in K-12. Our partnership with Children at Risk is one of those models, our Back to School Fest that we conduct in Texas and Louisiana by providing backpacks and medical screening and immunizations to students before the start of school. That's another way of powering their lives as they get prepared for another successful year. We also encourage our employees to get engaged in this work through our employee giving program, our HERO, we call it our HERO giving program. And we ask our employees to also give of their time and partner with nonprofit organizations where we would provide a grant to those institutions where our employees are volunteering, just to further encourage those efforts in the community. And as many of you are aware, our efforts in supporting STEM educators through professional development, partnering with local STEM providers as well as national organizations who have demonstrated a great impact in this space. But as we get them prepared and working with our teachers, we still have to ensure that we're providing opportunities to encourage the students to further their education through our efforts with our two-year community college programs and four-year programs, through scholarships, internships, and also diverse talent organizations that are focused on addressing the background needs and ensuring that the students are receiving the experiences that will help make them successful, ensure that they have rewarding experiences, and contribute to those communities and their families to help create stronger communities, and to understand the importance of volunteering. So again, this wouldn't be possible without champions like you who give your time and participate in panels, share your expertise, and also removing those obstacles and barriers and providing a perspective that's needed to ensure that we're making progress toward our ambition and goals and that we have real impact. So again, I'd like to thank all of you for your time today, for the effort in putting this session together, and hope that everyone has a great day and continue to move forward, making an impact in STEM education.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Fraser. And again, major thank you to our sponsors, Shell, Boardwalk Pipelines, and Corebridge. As I was saying shortly earlier, back to the beginning, we really are excited to see our state invest in Texas public schools, public education, and build strong partnerships with Texas workforce. Thank you to our partners, Early Learning Alliance, Molina Healthcare, United Way, Tarrant County, Children's Defense Fund Texas, Alchemy Studio and Labs, Fab Lab El Paso, SHEP, Texas A&M Commerce, Physics and Astronomy Department. Feedback on these events is critical for our ability to approve events and continue providing them at no cost to our attendees. Please fill out the survey in the chat box or this QR code provided, and follow us on social media at Children at Risk to sign up for our newsletter. Thank you so much for joining today. And as we say at the conclusion of all our events, we do this work for children.